Welcome to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged. I'm Rebecca Monet, CEO and Chief Scientist at Zoracle Profiles. I'm here with my co-host, community advocate, speaker, author, entrepreneur, and my dear friend, Tracy Kawa. So, Tracy, we have a very special guest today, Amy Patel Popat. Amy is a qualified optometrist, but moved into franchising after not being fulfilled at her work. She
Huh.
started the American-born franchise right at home in Southampton alongside her husband, Kev Popat, who was formerly an accountant. Over the past 8.5 years, they have grown their franchise to over 120 team members and have supported hundreds to remain safe at home. They've received two outstanding ratings from the UK regulatory body, Care Quality Commission. Care Quality Commission. I don't know why I kind of bumbled that, but there we are. In 2023, she won the Franchisee Woman of the Year at the EWIF Awards in London. And
Wow.
together with her husband, they won the Franchisee of the Year 2019 from the British Franchise Association. She has a passion for leadership, empowering women, and promoting a diverse and inclusive workforce. Welcome. Good to see you, Amy.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
So I just have to dig into this story for a minute, Amy. So there you are, you're an optometrist, and then the next thing you know, you're in franchise. How did that transition happen?
So I think from a very young age, I knew that I wanted to be in business. And I grew up in a family business of a convenience store. So every day after school, I'd go there and I'd help stack the shelves, whatever needed to be done. I saw my parents working very hard as well, but it was exciting. And what my parents wanted for me was a stable career. And like many Asian families, they encouraged their children to go into healthcare, accounting, law. And I was very much encouraged to do the same, which I didn't have a problem with. I could see stability was important. And I wanted to do something where I was working with people. So actually, optometry was a nice career for me to get into. But I quickly kind of felt that I couldn't do the routine of the job every single day. And I used to think back to the variety that my parents had in running a business and working with people, creating a community. And so that itch never kind of went away. And thankfully, when I met my husband, who was an accountant, from a similar background to myself, and he was also looking for that additional fulfillment. So we kind of put our heads together and started researching into different businesses. And that's really how it came about.
Nice.
So this story of feeling unfulfilled in a career is a common story before we then kind of go to the other side, so to speak, and decide to become business owners. So this point of let's call it diversity or variety or this need for something not so routine. Tell me a little bit more about that. Why is that so important to you?
I think a lot of people in business, women in business, entrepreneurs have that need for kind of variety, and they get bored and they can't sit still and they can't do the same thing every day. And I think franchising and businesses offer you that range of kind of experience. You can do marketing, you can do finance, you can do HR. You keep learning and you keep pushing your boundaries. And I think when you're your own boss as well, you can, do that how you want to do it. Whereas, you can't always do that when you're working for somebody else. You can be pigeonholed. I'm not saying all organizations do that, but you can feel a bit restricted.
So it sounds like you also get to use all different skills, like you're constantly learning, you're constantly growing.
Yes.
What do you think you evolved in? Like which
Mhm.
areas as far
Yeah.
as skills when you
Yeah.
made the transition from
Yeah.
optometry to business owner?
Yeah, gosh, so many areas. I think you pushes you to every single boundary, and the biggest one is probably resilience in business. I'd like to think I always saw myself as quite resilient, but you do get a lot of knockbacks, don't you, in business, and you've got to learn to get up and deal with it every single day. It's on your shoulders, it's your responsibility. And you can't go in with a bad attitude, and you can't lead teams like that. So rain or shine, you've got to pick yourself up, be positive and move forward. And you can only put on an act for so long. You do actually have to build the resilience, which mentally means that you can go home and also try and relax after that day. And I'd say I've only learned that in the last couple of years. It took a long time to get to that point.
Yeah. I like that you described resilience as a skill,
Yes.
right? Because the way we look at skills is that it's something we can learn and we can kind of build that skill. So you're not calling it a personality trait. I'm resilient, I'm flexible, I'm whatever. You're saying this is a skill. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. Again, I probably wouldn't have seen it as something as a skill before, but the last few years have taught me that actually I can be compassionate and I can care for my team, but also be able to say, okay, this chapter is now closed and I need to close it, and I need to move on to the next challenge. Which when you're quite young in business, you can take things very personally, and you can think, okay, the decisions that I've made there weren't the right ones, and emotionally it can affect you, and I did have trouble switching off from that. But now I think when one door closes, another one opens, and yeah, much better at kind of closing it off. And I have kids to thank for that as well. I think my kids have taught me to be like, right, be present here now. You gotta put
Mm.
that to one side. So, but yeah, I do think resilience is a skill if you're willing to hone it, for sure.
Mhm.
It's interesting to me that you're mentioning kids and teams and not being able to go into work, having to have high energy and positivity, because I had to look at your LinkedIn profile and I saw that you were at one point a camp counselor. So
Yes.
those are a lot of the skills, right? Like tell us about those skills that you learned no matter how old you were and that
Yeah.
you now apply.
Yeah. So, yeah, when I was 20, I got the opportunity to come to America to be a camp counselor in Maine. It was an amazing experience. But it was a 24-hour round the clock job looking after children. And at that point, I didn't have kids and I didn't really know what I was doing. But again, being away from family, dealing with the challenges that came there, that experience in itself taught me a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
And you
yeah.
were an activities director. That's high energy. It's like, come on,
Yeah.
guys, get on
Yeah.
the water skis, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. I think you've probably spoken to quite a few women in business, and I think, you have to be quite a high energy person to run your own business. And
Mhm.
so that's probably something that I've always had. I've always been quite an energetic person. Um, but yeah, it is certainly there were definitely transferable skills that I learned there as well.
For sure. So I want to talk about culture, right?
Hmm.
As you mentioned, you're Asian, you're Indian,
Hmm.
and somehow you ended up in the UK. Can you address, first tell us that story,
Yeah.
then I want to learn a little bit about how one culture adapting to another culture, that whole process.
Yeah, definitely. So my parents, my dad is from Africa, so his family would have moved to Africa from India when it was colonized by the British Empire. So they moved a bunch of Indians to Africa to help build the railways, and then they would have stayed there for a number of years. After so many years, there was a dictator called Amin who said, actually, we want the country back. The British put you here. You need to leave now. So yeah, it was literally, you know, a very quick thing, and they were told to pack a suitcase, and the British took them back into the UK. So they had to really start from scratch. None of them could speak English. They had to build everything back up. They were in a refugee camp for a couple of months before being given some housing. And from nothing, they rose up. They had to learn English. They had to start working whatever jobs they could get. My grandmother was the head of the family at that point because my grandfather was quite unwell, and she went out there, learned English in her spare time, and put together, you know, enough money to try and send her kids to college. And then my mother, my father then married my mum, who was in India at the time, and she joined them some years later when they were a little bit more settled. But very much still building their foundation in the UK, and working, you know, every single day. I grew up with my parents working 7 days a week. We didn't have family holidays. You know, it was every day, morning to night. They were working, they were taking in turns, shift work. Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. That's crazy. It reminds me years ago, so my honeymoon, and we took 3 months to go to Tabiuni, and similar stories where the Indians were brought to the Fijian islands to develop the agriculture and do some things. And in Tabiuni, Indians, any Germans, whoever, could not own property.
Yeah.
And yet, when I went, guess who was building the hotels, running the grocery stores? Everything was run by these hardworking, committed visionaries,
Yeah.
rather than the local Fijians. I was
Yeah.
kind of blown away, especially since technically they couldn't own land, but they're still putting all of their effort and work into something. So there's something about your culture with that hard work. Am I correct?
Yeah, definitely. And I think at that point, you know, my family have been in two different countries where they have not been, you know, given a platform, or right, we're going to be here forever now. So there's, without even knowing it, each generation is kind of being taught that work hard, may not last forever. And obviously coming to the UK, it's like make it or break it kind of thing. You have no choice but to work hard. And at every level, my dad worked extremely hard to then set up a business. My mum also worked alongside him, you know, without question, day and night. And us as the kids around them were just watching them, and really having and understanding the value of what they were doing. Because nothing came easy. Everything was a bit of a struggle. So yeah, hard work is just kind of ingrained in you at that point, because that's all you see. You don't see, like, I can't remember my mum just putting her feet up and being like, right, I'm going to have the weekend off. Like, I actually can't remember that. So sometimes when I sit down and I'm learning myself to like sit and actually fully relax, because I've never had that role modeled before. So, you know, even today, if I say to my mom, sit down, she almost feels a bit guilty because you have to make the most of the opportunity that you've been given. So yeah, it's yeah, you're still learning.
Right. She doesn't want to sit down because it seems like, no, what am I supposed to be doing right now? There's something I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's just not in the DNA. And I think there's an idea now of me time and self-care that's kind of coming in.
Yeah.
And it's a really good thing. We've got to all learn to do that. But when you don't have a choice,
Right.
because you know it's either that or food on the table, or you're thinking long term about setting your kids' future up, then me time, self-care, not even on the table.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing, this work ethic that as a culture you have, and also as a family was passed down from generation to generation. And because things were plucked away, not just
Yeah.
once, not just twice, but a third time, it's plucked away.
Yeah.
How do you today see the future? Do you
Mhm.
think about the future? Do you think about leaving a legacy? Or is it
Yeah.
just head down, build, 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 build? Tell me
Yeah.
about that thought process.
So if I'm honest, I don't think I've figured it out. I think if you asked me that question 3, 4 years ago, I was really on a treadmill because I was trying not to let the legacy of my mum, dad, grandmother go to waste. So I was working extremely hard. And I wanted to show them that, look, you didn't do all of that for no reason.
Mhm.
Today, and with my girls growing up, I'm starting to think a little bit differently. And again, being that first generation to be like, okay, hold on, we can stop, we can do this a bit slower. Maybe this is not going to be taken away from us. And maybe all the hard work that they have done can afford us, those days off and that me time. And, my family are very supportive of that. Although, when I had my girls, the first thing my grandmother said was, "When are you getting back to work?" So, yeah, I'm figuring it out literally as we speak. Yeah, that's how it's going.
Wow.
Amy, is your grandmother still a big influence in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So, she is now in a local care home, and my parents looked after her at home along with my brother for a long time until they really couldn't anymore. So she's in the last stages of Alzheimer's. She can't remember me, sadly, or her family, but I feel like she's still teaching me something, even, where she is now. And in the business of Right at Home, we obviously provide quality care at home to people, and we provide a lot of care to people with Alzheimer's. So she's actually taken me on that journey, so I can fully empathize with the families that we support now, which is amazing.
Was she part of that decision, or
Mhm.
just coincidental that she's going through this and you have a right at home franchise? Was she?
Yeah, yeah. I think she was part of that decision because me and my husband, again, part of our culture, our grandparents are a very integral part of our upbringing. She lived with me growing up, and my partner's grandmother lived with him growing up. So when we got into the care business, into the care franchise world, it wasn't an alien kind of topic or situation to support people at home because we'd seen our parents do it. We'd somewhat been of a support as well. So I felt we found that quite easy relating to the older generations because we literally lived with older generations growing up.
That's fascinating. It's like
Yeah.
you're living it, you're working it, you're learning from it. Like, what are some of the lessons you're learning from it?
Yeah. Um, So within the experience that we've been through with Alzheimer's, the communication with families and between family members can be quite distraught. And I think, especially in Asian families where getting care and support from outside is a bit of a taboo subject. So within our own family, we've broken, a few barriers to communication. We've supported our families into opening up and saying, look, we need some extra support, whether it be from other people in the family or now we need outside support. And again, that immigrant story kind of does come in there because you've never let anyone in before. And especially kind of culturally, something that's completely different. I think my grandmother's also helped me to open up those conversations, firstly with my family and then local community groups. So I've done a lot of work with local charities. We're currently working with the local temple to try and spread awareness about not only dementia, but other conditions, and also get people talking a little bit more to just kind of ease those tensions, which sometimes can get quite high when these situations arise.
There's this, again, I love this conversation about culture because the Asian culture it's very common to take care of the elderly within our homes. We respect it. We appreciate the wisdom and the battles that they have gone through. In the
Yeah.
US, it's kind of the opposite. We kind of throw our elders away when we put them into nursing homes rather than finding a way to keep them around our grandchildren and be part of the family. So it sounds like you are adapting a little bit to the British culture and vice versa. Brits are starting to understand that keeping mom and dad home with some help
Yeah.
might be a better option than
Yes.
sending them away, because there's benefit. Like you
Yeah.
said, you're learning every day from your grandma,
Yeah.
even though she's struggling with some health issues.
Yeah, definitely. So the Asian kind of culture model worked in India and Africa because the communities were living very close together. So if you were a family, you may have lived next door to your brother and then your sister on the other side, and then a very close family member across the way. So when somebody was aging in your family, you would have a network around you and they would support each other by preparing meals, or just being that kind of moral support. Now, when we've kind of immigrated to the West, that support is not there. So a lot of people are living alone. Their kids are moving to different places for work. And so that network, which, held them together in other countries, isn't here.
Mhm.
However, they're still holding on to the responsibility, but it might only be one or two people. So
Mhm.
that's too much for one or two people to be able to look after someone who has advancing complex needs, with no one to turn to or no one to say, well, actually, I'm struggling here. So that's what we're kind of like working with at the moment. And then on the flip side, the Western culture is now kind of saying, well, actually, we need to think about how we can build these communities and networks and how
Mhm.
we can keep people at home for longer. So yeah, there's lots of different things that I'm seeing today. Yeah.
I was going to ask you how the whole aging in place movement is
Mhm.
affecting your business, or,
Mhm.
the concept of what's happening right now.
Sorry, what do you mean by that?
In other words, like there's a whole aging in place. Like it used to be like the way Rebecca said, get rid of this person who's becoming elderly, put them in a home. But
Yeah.
now there's this whole concept, like in the interior design world, let's say, about aging in place. And I'm sure a few other industries where they're
Yeah.
actually building the home around the person, either with the disability or the person who is unable, the person who's getting elderly, with
Yeah.
the showers, the baths, all of these different, the ramps, the stairs, all of
Yeah.
that. Like, has it had an impact on your industry, your business, or is it just, everyday business, same as
Yeah.
usual, same as
Yeah.
always?
No, I think in the last 8 years from when we started, awareness has definitely risen that, oh, you can keep people at home. All right, an occupational therapist can come home or a district nurse can come home. So that is, definitely on the rise in the UK. There is talks of kind of nursing care to now be delivered at home. So I think the government are in talks about creating a kind of hospital to home or hospital home kind of scenario where you can receive a lot more care that you may have been getting at the tail end of your hospital visit in the home, so you can free up beds, and yeah, so that collaboration between the hospital, the doctors, and keeping people safe at home is definitely something that we're seeing more and more interest in.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of us, my age, the baby boomer generation, whose parents are ones that are needing this additional care. And here in the US, Amy, I got to tell you, we are noticing a difference in construction, more single level homes being built rather than, you know, multiple levels to accommodate these kinds of things. I remember, and I know this is going to sound crazy. I married a man many years ago, 17 years my senior, and we bought a home in California, and his number one priority was a single level home. And I'm like going, well, that really limits us, especially in California where land is so precious. But he
Yeah.
says, Rebecca, I'm going to die in this house. And I had never even thought about the importance of this, that he needed to be ambulatory for the next 20 years plus. So I think, like Tracy said, and you're saying, we are starting to pay more attention. We're also doing, smaller residential homes where there's full-time care, but you're not going to a nursing home. You're there with 2 or 3 other people. And so it becomes more like a family that are there to create that community that you were talking about, Amy. So you're in an incredible space as a franchisee, for those of us at this age and our parents, etc. So I got a question for you. When you talk to your mom, you talk to your dad, you talk to your grandma, what do you think were some of the biggest obstacles that they had to go through all of this change and finally landing in the UK?
Mhm. Um, it was a very racist place at the time. So in the 70s, they weren't allowed to go to certain places. I mean, to be honest, there's a long, long list. Racism, the language barrier, financially, they felt they were ridiculed, and there was a lot of pressure on them to make it, but people kind of didn't want them there either. Now, thankfully the world is moving on from that, but yeah, they had every single barrier there possibly could be. They were able to start this business because they bought a business in quite a rundown area, and no one probably wanted to buy that business. And it ended up being such a fantastic foundation for them. And, thankfully they were also quite risky people. They were risk takers, and they took a few risks which paid off. And more than anything, they just worked incredibly hard. But I think they had everything stacked against them, really. And my dad would always say, well, I didn't have a platform. I didn't have someone saying, well, actually, this is how you manage your finances. I couldn't really communicate with, a bank manager and say, look, this is my situation. Can you give me some advice? So all of that came a lot later for him. And, thankfully, they've given us the platform and the advice. We get a lot of advice from our parents and wider family and community, which is amazing. And yeah, we really try to leverage that because we know that our parents didn't have that.
That was just 50 years ago. Think about that kind of racism, that kind of exclusion, the lack of support, the lack of community. That's just 50 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I remember them saying there would be doors and there would be like, posters in the shop windows saying
You
no
can't come.
colored people allowed. Yeah. And a few years later, they were opening a shop themselves. So yeah, it's incredible to think of, isn't it? But it wasn't that long ago.
Do you think, Amy, you mentioned the word risk. Do you think because all odds were against them, they had no choice but to take risk?
Yeah, they got nothing to lose. So yeah, I think people do take more risks when there's like there is literally nothing to lose. So once you get comfortable, I don't think you want to kind of go out of your comfort zone as much. But yeah, make it or break it, then you do.
I was thinking that when you were talking about, your family and you working pretty much 24/7, right? You said you didn't get any breaks. You said there were no, or maybe that was in the pre-discussion before the show, but you were saying that there were no family holidays.
Yeah, so growing up, we didn't go on any family holidays. Our only holidays were to other family members' houses, and that was to visit them really. We got it when we got into our teens. I think we went on our first family holiday when all of us were together when I was probably 15. And it was so weird, like just sitting together in another country and actually having a proper holiday together. And, you know, since then, thankfully, we've been able to do many, many more. But yeah, it was also my parents learning to be like, right, now we can relax. Now we can start going on holidays. Now we can start enjoying the fruits of our labor. Without the guilt of, right, have we made it yet or not? Or, you know, we still got things to achieve and things to do.
Wow.
This idea of I have nothing to lose,
Yeah.
therefore I can take this risk. There's huge psychology behind that when you
Yeah.
think about it, you know. And I
Yeah.
do think that's why immigrants do tend to do so well, not
Yeah.
necessarily first generation, but second, third generation, because they put it all out there. They put it all out there where the rest of us have gotten, like you said, into this comfort zone, and we're not going to give up, you know, this cushy job. We're not going to give up living in a certain neighborhood. You know, we're going to stay within that. So
Yeah.
thank you for pointing that out.
Mhm.
I'd like to shift gears a little bit.
Mhm.
You were given a wonderful foundation for who you have become. Look into the future for us.
Mhm.
What do you see for yourself? What do you see for your franchise?
Mhm. So in the last 5 years, I think I've become quite passionate about mentoring other leaders and finding people who, you know, maybe weren't given the platform. And I look back at my family and I think, you know, if only someone had just said, actually, you know, let me help you. Let me give you the leadership skills and let me give you the advice to take you to the next level. And in our Right at Home franchise here in Southampton, we have a predominantly female workforce. And I see that a lot in the females that I work with, where they don't have the confidence, you know, generationally, they won't put themselves for leadership positions. They'll take a little step back, they'll sit at the back of the room, that kind of thing. And I feel like bringing those women forward and saying, here's your platform, come on, let's work together. What's your barrier? So looking to the future, I think I want to continue to support and mentor and coach women and other people who need a platform and want to be heard. I'm very pro and inclusive and diverse environment for people to work in, and providing those platforms from people from no matter what background they come from, and really educating our teams about what that means. And in the past, I even worried about sharing my story, and only recently have I shared it with my team in more detail, because I didn't want that to kind of be diluting kind of what we were doing, if that makes sense. It's not a sob story. I'm very privileged in the position that I'm in, but I want to use that now to kind of help and support other people, as well as break down the taboo in the Asian community around care and reaching out for support, and trying to get out to more minority communities where I can through my experiences.
That's so important to share your story. You know, we
Mhm.
don't realize it, but others, when they hear our stories, it resonates in their hearts, right? And they're like,
Yes.
wow, she really, you know, she wasn't handed this on a silver platter. She had
Yeah.
to work. She's been working since she's a kid.
Yeah.
When you look back on your life, when you think about your family, your history, your grandmother, like I thought a couple of times I spotted you getting a little emotional. Like what really tugs at your heartstrings when you look back and you look at the journey from where you all have been to where you're, you know, where you are now?
Mhm. Oh God, there's just too much.
Oh gosh, I'm gonna cry with you.
I couldn't pinpoint one thing, but I think the sacrifices that have been made from the women and the men, and you know, of all the people before me. Huge sacrifices. That that really stands out. And I think looking to the future, don't think I will ever kind of stop trying to evolve and develop and reach out and do things, because I've got this platform and I don't have to sacrifice as much as the people before me did.
Yeah.
If that makes
Is there a
sense.
sense of responsibility? Is there a feeling of responsibility to perpetuate what's been given to you?
Yes, yeah, for
Mhm.
sure.
Sacrifice. Sacrifice is a form of love, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
that they did this for you
yeah.
and the generations that will come once they're even long gone. That's a
Mhm.
huge sacrifice. It is the ultimate form of love,
Yes,
is to be
definitely.
able to put others ahead of yourself. So I'll do whatever it takes to take care of that next generation and that next generation, whether it's through life lessons or working hard or whatever that is. It's love. Basically, that's
Mhm.
what they gave you. And you're like, you call it a platform, and that's exactly what
Yeah.
it is.
Mhm.
So, Amy, if people wanted to learn more about you and
Mhm.
have a way to share your story with others that could benefit from hearing it, how would they
Yeah.
get hold of you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. So my profile is Amin Patel Popat. They can also look at our website, which is www.rightathome.co.uk /Solent. So those are probably the best ways to get hold of me.
Okay, before we go further,
Mhm.
it's Ami.
Yes, yeah, it's
I am so
pronounced.
sorry. I'm surprised you didn't smack me this whole time.
That's okay. That's okay.
Ami, that's beautiful.
Mhm.
I love it. Well, thank you for being with us today and sharing your story. I'm sure it brought back some great memories and pulled at your heartstrings. I know it did for me. And I love hearing what the future is going to be like, that this will continue, this ripple effect will continue, even if it's not with your own family, which it will be through your two daughters, but
Yes.
it'll be through many others. So I think it's a beautiful story that you have to share. So thank you for being with us, Amy. We appreciate
Thank you for inviting me as well, and asking these questions, because like you said, it is important. But we rarely delve this deep into, why people do things. So thank you very much.
it. Yeah. And Tracy, I'm going to punt it over to you for your final words.
I'm going to catch that punt because I have to share that. I just love the fact, Amy, that you're just someone who doesn't take things for granted. You're just so full of life and appreciation and a need to now, reciprocate and pay it forward. And I think everything that you've been through and that your family has been through, that you've embraced and internalized, has given you a very wise and a very strong heart.
Yes, indeed. Yes,
Yeah.
Thank you.
indeed.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Very
Thank you,
kind.
Tracy. Thank you, Ame. We appreciate it. And for those of you listening in today to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forge, make sure to share this interview. It's an inspiring story. Like, comment, and then we'll see you next week on another episode.
Thank you.